What if I told you that your most valuable asset isn't your money, your time, or even your freedom, but your attention? And right now, that attention is being hijacked. Not randomly, not accidentally, but systematically. You live in a world where your focus is no longer your own. You are surrounded by machines and platforms designed not just to attract your attention, but to trap it. Social media apps, search engines, video platforms, and even your favorite online stores are not just services. They are digital ecosystems engineered to harvest your cognitive energy. Every swipe, every tap, every second spent staring into the screen is being measured, monetized, and manipulated. And it all starts in your brain. You were not built for this environment. Your nervous system evolved in a world of scarcity, scarce food, scarce novelty, scarce stimulation. But now you live in the opposite, an overabundance. A surplus of stimuli so rich that your ancient brain doesn't stand a chance. Dopamine, the molecule of motivation and attention, is no longer regulated by reality. It is artificially spiked again and again by short videos, infinite scrolls, push notifications, and rapid-fire content. And that dopamine creates addiction not by chance, but by design. The concept is not new. In fact, it was discovered in the 20th century by B.F. Skinner. Skinner put rats in boxes and gave them levers to press. Sometimes pressing the lever delivered food, sometimes it didn't. The unpredictable nature of the reward made the rats obsess. They pressed the lever over and over. That randomness, the variable reward, is what today's digital platforms exploit. When you open TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube Shorts, you don't know what's coming next. Sometimes it's funny. Sometimes it's shocking. Sometimes it's utterly meaningless. But every time, your brain is searching for the hit of dopamine. The illusion of novelty, the endless scroll is the lever. The content is the pellet. You are the rat. But this goes beyond addiction. This is identity manipulation. These platforms don't just want to keep you online. They want to shape what you believe, how you think, how you behave. The longer you stay, the more data they collect. Every click, every pause, every emotional reaction feeds the algorithm. And the algorithm doesn't just reflect you, it reshapes you. The algorithm starts to anticipate your desires. Then it manufactures them. You think you're exploring content, but in truth, the content is exploring you. Your attention is studied, categorized, and profiled. Your identity becomes a commodity, bought and sold in real time to advertisers, influencers, and political movements. This is not just surveillance capitalism. This is cognitive capitalism. Your thoughts are no longer private. Your attention is no longer yours. Your digital self becomes a puppet pulled by invisible hands. And because the system rewards engagement over truth, outrage over understanding, speed over depth, your values begin to shift. You start craving immediacy. You lose patience for complexity. You reject silence. You forget how to sit with yourself. You forget how to focus. In this world, silence becomes anxiety. Stillness becomes restlessness. And boredom becomes unbearable. You reach for your phone in elevators, in checkout lines, on the toilet, even during conversations. Not because you want to, but because you've been programmed to. You've been conditioned to run from the present moment into the arms of curated distraction. Every time you escape discomfort with a scroll, you teach your brain that boredom is dangerous and content is salvation. That training builds a habit. That habit becomes identity. And identity becomes fate. But let's go deeper. What happens neurologically when your attention is hijacked? Your brain enters what's called a default mode network when it's at rest, essentially a reflective, introspective mode that supports creativity, memory, and meaning. But when you're constantly stimulated, your brain never enters that state. The constant bombardment of stimuli keeps you locked in reactive mode, and over time, that changes your brain structure. Studies have shown that people who use social media excessively show decreased gray matter in areas related to decision-making, emotional regulation, and impulse control. Your ability to focus weakens. Your threshold for novelty rises. Your baseline happiness drops. Why? Because the highs of hyper-stimulated dopamine releases make reality feel dull. Your relationships feel dull. Reading feels dull. Work feels impossible. Life starts to feel gray unless it's filtered through a screen. That's not just a bad habit. That's a hijacked nervous system. And it doesn't just affect your psychology, it affects your philosophy. Your worldview shifts from meaning to entertainment, from effort to ease, from depth to distraction. You stop asking hard questions. You stop seeking long-term goals. You start living in an endless present of shallow gratification. And the worst part? You start believing that's normal, that this is just how things are, that the world is fragmented, that you have no control, that scrolling is harmless. But it's not harmless. It's transformative, and not in the way you think. It is transforming you into someone more passive, more programmable, more distracted, less aware of what you could be, less aware that there's a war for your mind. Because that's what this is, a war for your attention. A war waged not with guns but with algorithms, not with violence but with persuasion, not by enemies but by platforms you trust. Every minute you spend online is a bid in this auction. Your attention is being sold. Your future is being shaped by invisible metrics. And if you're not careful, your entire life will be lived on someone else's schedule, someone else's design, someone else's algorithm. But what's the cost of this war? The cost is agency, autonomy, the deep, irreplaceable part of you that decides what matters. Because when your attention is hijacked, so is your ability to choose your focus. And without that ability, freedom becomes an illusion. Philosophers from the Stoics to Sartre have emphasized that attention is the starting point of choice, and choice is the core of freedom. What you pay attention to becomes your reality. What you ignore fades from existence. The architecture of your mind is built from the bricks of your focus. So when that focus is controlled, your mind becomes a construction site for someone else's blueprint. The problem is, this doesn't feel like control. It feels like convenience, like entertainment. But that's the genius of it. The most effective control systems are the ones that look like choices, like freedom, like pleasure. The platforms don't force you to scroll. They simply engineer an environment so seductive, so frictionless, so rewarding in the short term that saying no feels like deprivation. The enemy of attention isn't noise, it's engineered desire. Dopamine on tap. And the moment you realize this, something painful happens. You become aware of your own vulnerability. You start to see how fragile your attention really is. How easy it is to lose hours, days, even years to mindless consumption. How quickly you trade your sovereignty for stimulation. And that realization can feel paralyzing. but it's also the beginning of change. Because awareness breaks the spell. It lifts the veil. It gives you the power to step outside the loop and observe it. That is the moment of liberation, not when you delete the app, but when you see the game for what it is. When you stop blaming yourself and start recognizing the design. Because yes, personal responsibility matters, but we also have to name the system. The system that profits when you're distracted. The system that weakens your will in order to strengthen its algorithm. This is not about guilt, it's about strategy. And if you want to reclaim your mind, you need to understand that attention is a muscle, and like any muscle, it can be trained. Not by force, but by consistency, intention, awareness. The first step is to get bored on purpose. Not as punishment, but as practice. Let your brain sit in silence. Let it wander. Rebuild your tolerance for stillness. That's where your original thoughts live. That's where your creativity regenerates. When you stop feeding on digital sugar, you begin to crave depth again. You begin to think again. You begin to remember who you were before the scroll. The second step is to protect your attention like a sacred resource. That means boundaries. No phone in the first hour of the day. No endless feed before bed. Create friction. Delete the apps if you have to. Turn off notifications. Use grayscale. Anything that breaks the stimulus response cycle is a win. The third step is to choose active creation over passive consumption. Make something. Write, draw, build, speak. Move your attention from the reactive to the generative. That rewires your brain. It gives you proof that you are more than a consumer. You are a creator, and creation builds identity. Not an identity given to you by the algorithm, but forged by choice, discipline, and presence. And presence is the ultimate rebellion. In a world where everyone is fragmented, the ability to be here fully, fiercely is power. True power, not loud, not flashy, but grounded, solid. A power that can't be manipulated because it knows where it stands. That's the kind of man you can become, the kind of woman, the kind of human, not just reactive, but sovereign, attentive, alive. And when you reach that level of awareness, something else happens. You stop being addicted to stimulation, and you start being drawn to truth, depth, silence. You begin to see the world again, not as pixels, but as presence. You hear people better. You connect more deeply. You rediscover your values, your path, your mind. And in doing that, you don't just free yourself, you become a threat to the system. Because a focused mind can't be sold. A present soul can't be swayed. A conscious life can't be bought. That is the revolution. Not escape from the digital world, but mastery within it. You don't have to run to the woods. You just have to take back the steering wheel. The algorithm doesn't get to decide who you are. You do. With every click, every scroll, every choice, you are voting for the kind of mind you want to build. The kind of life you want to live. The kind of world you want to leave behind. This isn't easy. It won't happen in a weekend. But if you start small, if you stay consistent, if you fight for your attention, like your life depends on it, it will change you. Because your life does depend on it. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. And where your energy flows, your life grows. That's the secret. That's the strategy. That's the path forward. Reclaim your mind. Rebuild your focus. And remember, The most dangerous person in a distracted world is the one who can still choose what to see.